Hello, and thank you for joining another episode of the Ever Upward podcast. This one marks our second solo episode where we provide a general update and talk about the last 9 episodes, in this case, dating back to April 4th with William George. But besides giving you kind of an overview of the last 9 episodes, we also want this podcast to be incredibly authentic, meaning you need the ability to not only get to know the guest, but get to know me. So I thought I'd start this episode off with a little bit of a life update. This episode will be released on Thursday, June 13th, marking essentially 1 month since I was married on May 11th. And a little bit of an idea surrounding the wedding for those of you that may be paying for kids' weddings or paying for your own wedding, whatever it may be. As an accountant, my mindset around weddings tends to be around the cost, right? Every item that we would incur was purely a cost in my mindset. And when you think of it that way, weddings seem very expensive. There's no way around that. But through the whole idea or the whole process of planning for the wedding, and this, I give credit to my now wife for this, but my mindset shifted into more of an investment into the one time that all friends and family for both of us will be in one location. So every single cost is an investment into that day and that experience that we were having, celebrating with all of our friends and family. And I think when you think of it that way, uh, you come from an attitude of a little bit more gratitude and are able to enjoy the day and those costs that you're spending. So just a little bit of a tidbit there. It was a perfect day full of celebrating and something that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And then we followed that up with 2 weeks in Italy, courtesy of the father of the groom. So shout out to my dad for the most amazing honeymoon that we could have asked for. It was absolutely beautiful. And then shout out also to all the support that we received over the last year and a half or so of planning from all of our friends and family, financially, mentally, emotionally. We have a first class support group. Some of you are listening now. You know who you are, and we could not be more supportive. So with that, if you're working on something in your life or you're trying to find something in your life that you can work on over the next 6 to 12 months, I highly recommend investing in your support group because not only is it important, but it is going to pay dividends in ways that you just don't even know about. So besides getting married, we have another life update that we're pretty excited about. A little over 2 months ago, we found out that we were pregnant. And so today marks 16 weeks in our journey, in our pregnancy journey. And we could not be more happy, excited, and grateful. It has not been without its challenges, to say the least. But each challenge accentuates our positive feelings and brings more empathy to those that have a different experience. And so we're just excited about this, and who knows, where life's going to take us. But we're excited to see all these challenges happening in our life. And with that being said, I thought I'd start out today's episode by talking about this whole idea of life comes at you fast. And I think if you've caught the last couple of minutes, you can understand why this is kind of where I want to start this episode. Because I think when you're starting your career, coming out of college and single, and not to say that that part of your life doesn't come with challenges, because it absolutely does. My early 20s, mid 20s were some of the most challenging years of my life. But you hear that talked around, the water cooler, if you will, this whole idea of life comes at you fast, and maybe you don't fully understand it or you shrug it off as I did. But I think I'm starting to fully understand what people mean when they say that. And so I thought I would give you a little bit of a recap of our 2024 for myself and my now wife. We became a partner at Excelsior Capital, the real estate firm that I work with, taking over a role outside of my comfort zone and trying to replace someone that is probably the most well-networked person that I know and someone who I look up to incredibly. I started the podcast and I've somehow kept it consistent now for half of a year. My initial goal with the podcast in terms of kind of volume was to hit 20 episodes and just see where we are. And this episode marks that 20th episode. So I look forward to diving into kind of a recap, an overall recap personally with how I think it's gone, what I could do different, and just kind of see what the rest of the year looks like and maybe share that with you in the next solo episode. We also, as I mentioned before, found out we were pregnant. This came completely unexpectedly and in the midst of the home stretch of planning for a big event in the wedding. But we could not be more excited about it. And as most parents will say, I already have that feeling of it being the greatest accomplishment of my life. And just kind of seeing that feeling grow as well. We got married, sort of. We actually eloped without anyone knowing back in November of 2023. But that was more so to share a special moment between the two of us and didn't really change how we looked at our ceremony in May. So no one really knew about it from November until May. And then we started telling family members and friends the week of the wedding, just so people weren't, asking questions and wondering why we weren't signing a marriage license. We took our first trip to Europe, also mentioned previously. Neither of us knew what to expect or have been very cultured to date, if I'm being honest. I've relatively stayed in a bubble within the United States. However, the trip did ignite a curiosity and a new perspective in us that we can't wait to explore. And we're already thinking about where to go next, albeit probably a little bit more budget conscious than the honeymoon. And then last but not least, and by we, I mean my wife and I, are in the process of starting a marketing firm. And when I say we, it's really her, but she's the talent and the brains behind it. But I'm trying to provide as much support as I can. Side note, if you or someone needs help in this category, please do reach out, and I'd love to introduce you to her. I've scratched the surface in this arena over the last few years and enjoy marketing very much, but this is certainly her expertise and not mine, although I can hold my own to some degree. But if you've liked what you've seen on my social media or on the podcast, most likely it has come from her. But just like in life, as most husbands can relate to, I probably should have listened to her more in this regard than I actually do, and I'd be a lot further along, no doubt. But with all that being said, that's kind of the update on life in general. Let's walk through these last 9 episodes, starting with episode 11 with my coworker and partner, William George. We discussed the state of the real estate market. This included interest rates, liquidity, and buyer-seller dynamics. We also dove into Excelsior Capital a little more and provided an inside look into how we source, underwrite, and execute due diligence on our acquisitions. So if you're looking for an episode that's going to help you understand CRE more in depth, or maybe Excelsior Capital, if you've been listening to us for a while, more in depth as well, please be sure to check out that episode. That's episode 11 with William George. My main 2 takeaways come from his thought process and something that we discuss, relatively often, considering we work together every single day, is although commercial real estate has experienced a slowdown over the last 18 months, that goes without being said, it is starting to behave more rationally, if you will, and is not seeing, knock on wood, maybe this distress that the headlines portray or that some of us were expecting. Next up was episode 12 with Ben Moore at Evo Performance, a physical therapist in Nashville, Tennessee. If I had to do one episode over again, and it would certainly be this one, and I'm to blame for that. It's certainly not any fault of Ben's whatsoever. He crushed it. I just was not in the right mindset that morning due to some illness. So if I had to do one over, Ben has helped me with some physical therapy for years now, and we've had amazing conversations. And this one was just kind of a glimpse into that. I certainly recommend looking up Ben. He's done a couple of other podcasts as well, and diving into more of his thought process. But in this episode, we spoke about the 4 pillars of health. If you want to know what those are, be sure to check out episode 12. I'm not gonna tell you. You got to go find out for yourself. And then we also dove into the role of a coach or community, if you will, in achieving success. In episode number 13, I sat down with Chris Meese, and I should probably be learning this lesson given the news I just shared. You probably, as like a parent, should not say which is your favorite, but in this case, this episode over the last 9 was definitely my favorite. For the fact that it was just a very real conversation about overcoming tragedy, maintaining a positive attitude, among other things. And I thought Chris was just incredibly real and open, and I really appreciated it. So be sure to check out episode 13 with Chris Meese if that interests you. Episode 14 saw our first financial advisor on the podcast, which, if you listen to our teaser episode, is one of our main 4 pillars. Jake Powell and I discussed the personalization in financial planning. We dove into dopamine culture and again hit on the role of a coach. And then I talked about items such as trust, risk, and even Bitcoin, as that has seen another massive surge over the last few months. It was a jam-packed episode that you'll definitely want to check out if you haven't already. Episode 15 was the result of my first introduction from the podcast. So someone that I'd had on previously introduced me to this guest, which is what this is all about. I mean, it was great to have that happen, and then for it to be someone as great as Nate Salas, who was the guest on the episode, makes it that much more special. So we discussed ways to scratch that entrepreneurial itch by serving your community, and talked about important topics such as authenticity, overcoming fear, and showing up with intent. So simply showing up is a great start. I don't want to discount that at all, but it's not enough. You want to show up with intention. In episode 16, I sat down with a good friend of mine and someone who we at Excelsior work very closely with, Graham Gilreath. I think my expectation for the episode was maybe more to dive into the debt markets surrounding commercial real estate, since that's what Graham does. We kind of stayed away from that for this episode. Maybe we'll circle back to it at some other point. But this was a great conversational episode diving into finding passion within your career. A lot of us picked a career because that's what we were told to, or we kind of fell into something that we weren't expecting. But there is the ability to find passion within that as you stay in something that you weren't expecting to for maybe longer than you thought. We also talked about learning from previous generations and how that impacts the workplace, and then loyalty within the workplace, which kind of leans into that learning from previous generations thought process. Excuse me. If you're looking for the most interesting person we've had on the podcast, be sure to check out episode number 17 with Sean Casey. I didn't do the best job of directing the conversation. I really wish, I told a couple of friends this that know both of us, I really wish you could have been a fly on the wall for our pre-conversation, of course, at a bar over a cocktail. But Sean did not disappoint by any means, and any negative feelings I have are purely on my performance on this episode, I highly recommend checking out episode number 17. I could literally talk to this guy and pick his brain for hours. But in this episode, we targeted in on imposter syndrome, which is something I've dealt with my whole life, but specifically the last 6 months as I've been on this podcast journey and stepped way outside of my comfort zone. We also discussed building teams and seeking opportunities and being adaptable. Episode 18 was with Paul Steele as we dove into the current insurance market. If you're looking for the topic that has given me the most headache over the last few years, this is certainly it. We've kind of talked about insurance in one of the early episodes with Marcus Harris as well. But this one was more geared towards the commercial side of things. And insurance has deeply impacted our business at Excelsior and continues to provide its challenges. But having folks like Paul in your corner makes all the difference. So be sure to check out episode 18 and listen in to find out why the industry is so dynamic and how you can best mitigate risk. And then last but certainly not least is episode 19 with Lindsay Major. I was absolutely pumped to release this episode last week, not only because Lindsay is a good friend of mine and incredibly successful, but we discussed something that I am very passionate about, and that being what she calls customer experience, what we call at Excelsior, shout out to Brian Adams for this, our investor journey. You're certainly not always going to get it right, but it's about doing and learning from each experience and evolving. We dive into the impact customer experience has on business success, excuse me, automation versus hands-on approach, understanding and meeting your customer where they are, among other things. She introduced me to a Six Sigma approach that I cannot wait to explore further. We actually dive into it a little bit deeper with another guest in one of the upcoming episodes. But it's something that really intrigues me, and who knows, maybe just become certified here in the next year or so. Overall, I'm pleased with how the last 9 episodes have gone. Have continued to have top-notch guests on the podcast, which is going to set the tone for the rest of the year. I'm incredibly grateful for each of you, for the people that have come on to the podcast and the people that have listened to the podcast or continue to listen or found us recently. Be sure to listen in each week with episodes being released on Thursday morning. And as always, if something specific on here piques your interest, or if you'd like to get in touch with me or one of my guests, please do reach out, and we'll see you next time. Ever upward.